Good evening, everyone. November 13th, Silicon Valley Clean Energy Board of Directors meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order at this time. Welcome to those of you who are joining us in person, and some are attending virtually. At this point, I am going to request Andrea to proceed with all the protocols.
Yes, good evening, everybody. Those of us joining us remotely who would like to make a public comment, you will be given 3 minutes during the public comment period, at which time you can unmute yourself. You will have 3 minutes. And please raise your hand when prompted.
Okay, should we start with the roll call?
Yes, and before we do that, if Director Meadows wouldn't mind making a statement about her participation this evening.
Yes, thank you, and directors. I am appearing remotely pursuant to AB 2449 because I am unable to attend in person due to a physical disability, which qualifies under the Americans with Disabilities Act. There is no other individual 18 years or older present in the room at my remote location.
Thank you, Director Meadows. And with that, I will proceed with roll call. In person, we have Director Martinez Beltran.
Present.
Scozola.
Here.
Mekachek.
Present.
Chair Walia.
Here.
Vice Chair Tyson.
Here.
Director Rennie.
Here.
Director Lee. Joining us remotely, we have Director Meadows.
Here.
Chua.
Here.
Hilton.
Here.
Thank you. And I will note that currently Director Showalter and Mohan and Klein are absent, but we do have a quorum of our board.
Okay, wonderful. Let's have public comments on non-agendized matter at this point. Do we have anyone? Okay, I close that and bring us to consent calendar. Do we have any public comment on that? No? Okay, bring it back to the board. Any comments or a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you. Moved by Director Lee.
Second.
Seconded by Director Martinez Beltran. And can we have vote, please?
Yes. Chair Walia.
Aye.
Vice Chair Tyson.
Yes.
Scozola.
Aye.
Rennie.
Aye.
Mekachek.
Aye.
Martinez Beltran.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Hilton.
Aye.
Meadows. Meadows. Director Meadows, I believe you're muted. I don't know if she can hear us.
Yeah. Sally, you're muted.
She may not be able to hear us. Director Chua?
I think we lost her.
Yeah, she's dropped. Thank you. That motion carries.
Okay. Let's move on to the regular calendar, and we will start with the CEO's report. CEO Monica Padilla.
Good evening, Chair Walea and directors. Okay, so for today, I was actually trying to pull up the names of all the people I want to recognize as part of the CEO report in terms of promotions. And you're going to have to give me a second here. But we had several promotions that we offered to employees as part of our normal, I found it, our normal review process. And so most of them were promotions within that process, but we did have one employee who was hired to be in another department, and that's Kathy Shea. So Kathy is going to be our new power settlements planner residing in the power resources and operation team. She was in the finance administration team. We also gave promotions to Hannah Gustafsson, Leanna Hine, Kaylee Dodson, Leslie Matarang, Michaela Pippin, Brett Siriani, Owen Milligan, and Adam Pierce. So quite a bit of excitement or reasons to celebrate this last month with all those promotions. The other thing that I wanted to bring to your attention was a couple of events that we attended last month, including a customer site visit in New Mexico that myself and Director of Power Resources, Chris Van Vector, attended to visit a fairly large project in the middle of New Mexico for wind, along with a big transmission project called SVCEA. This is a project that's being developed by a company called Pattern. So we had some pictures that we shared at the executive committee meeting. I think we're going to share them here too. Oh, great. So here's some pictures of that site visit. You can see transmission and wind turbines. So, and then the other exciting event that we attended last month was a ribbon cutting for a project called Victory Pass Solar Plus Storage. Chair Wailea was able to present or say a few words on behalf of SVCE at the ribbon cutting. In the picture here, you can see the project. It's fairly large, and along with us cutting the ribbon. And we were also given a nice little commemorative glass plaque. So wanted to bring that to share with you all as well. And then the last thing that we wanted to chat about was, or to share with you, is just a little bit of our observations are related to the federal elections and the state and local elections that happened last week. As you all heard the news, so things are going to change. We just want to remind you that at SVCE, our mission hasn't changed. We are committed to the mission as staff, and we hope the board is also committed to the mission that we have to really clean up our portion of the grid and to decarbonize our transportation and built environment for our communities. And so while we do believe that that mission might be a little more challenging in the coming years, we, I think, have a really good program and organization and the funding to carry out our part of that, of the need to combat global warming. So, but I did invite Benna, our Director of Legislative and Government Affairs, to say a few words about some of the observations that we saw related to the elections.
Thank you, Monica. Good evening, board. So as Monica mentioned, we had a major election last week, and just wanted to summarize some of the impacts to SVCE on the state and national level. So at the state level, Democrats are projected to maintain their supermajority in both the Assembly and the House, which should provide some political stability on the policy side. And then the other really good news for SVCE is that voters overwhelmingly passed Proposition 4, the climate bond, which SVCE also supported. And that will provide really significant long-term state investments in issues that we care about, including wildfire mitigation, transmission investments, long duration storage, and offshore wind generation. So really good news at the state level. At the federal level, we wanted to let you know that staff is working right now to analyze potential opportunities and challenges with the change in administration at the federal level. And we will be working very closely with our trade associations, including the LEAN organization, which is the National CCA Trade Association, to make sure that the clean energy investments that the previous administration has put forward and the policies are really advanced that will support the clean energy transition. So with that, happy to end here and answer any questions.
Anything else? Thank you, Benna. Anything else you'd like to add, Monica?
No, if there's no questions for Benna, I don't have any other items.
We do have a question before. Okay, go ahead. Then before you go to the next item, I'll make some remarks. Go ahead.
I was just curious, Benna, on the previous funds that have been allocated. Are those already, like, there's already a plan, they're all going to be spent already, or is there any, with new administration coming in, is there any way that some of these can be rescinded? We'd actually lose out on potential opportunities. I was very curious about that.
It's very hard to know right now what exactly will happen. I think traditionally when funds are awarded, they are considered spent, and it's unusual for an administration to claw back that money.
Okay, that's great news to hear that.
Yep, but there are still funds in the Inflation Reduction Act that have not gone out the door, so I think those are at risk. But I will note that the Inflation Reduction Act was a law that was passed by Congress, and so any changes to that would also need to be another law that's passed by Congress. So procedurally, I think there's just a process that the federal government would have to go through if they wanted to rescind some of that. In addition, there are some executive actions that the president-elect could take that could slow down significantly the rollout of investments like the Inflation Reduction Act or the bipartisan infrastructure law. But again, I think it's too early to know exactly what form those actions might take.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Great question. Thank you. Any other questions? Director Lee?
Yes, just follow up on that one, Benna. How much money are we talking about here that we're trying to get from these grants? Approximately.
Don't have a number off the top of my head for you. I know that SVC has applied for several grants, both from the IIJA and the Inflation Reduction Act. I don't think we have been successful. But for example, we have a pending application for the charging and fueling infrastructure, EV charging station grant that I believe we've talked about with this board before. And we just signed a letter today really urging the Biden administration to get those funds out as soon as possible. So it just gives you an example of some of the actions that we're taking currently.
Is this something that our contact in Congress could help speed up? And if it is, how we could advocate, because we have many strong allies from the Bay Area. So just let us know what we could do to help.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Great point. We still have 2 months
But
Thank
who's
you.
counting?
before any changes. I'm staying neutral.
Thank you.
I'm hopeful things will stay on par. The organization's goals continue, and for that, the commitment from Team SVCE is much appreciated. Thank you all so much. So I'm going to kind of go back from the thank yous to congratulations to all the staff members, as reported out by CEO Padilla. You know what's fabulous for the directors here, to see some of you come join the organization and then to get to see you get promoted. That is just lovely. And on behalf of the board, I would like to congratulate each one of you. I counted, there are 9 persons I think I counted here. So that's great. It's wonderful how stellar the team is. I would also like to thank all the staff members who were there for the site visit for Victory Pass, and I know Director Mekachuk and I were the 2 who represented the board there. It was quite a trip to actually see a project. This was the first one for me, and I want to thank all of my colleagues who encouraged me to make that trip happen. Long trip, early flight the day after the prior SVCE board meeting, and Monica was there, Michaela Pippin. Michaela, thank you to you and your team, and Monica, thank you for everyone. Thanks to each one. Emily, Sophia, and Chris, of course, and Willie. It was great. Hot day, but very hot day. It was 103 degrees. And again, Monica, thank you for bringing this so we can show everyone what Clearwater, just a memento for SVCE. It's in the SVCE office, and good to see how every day SVCE is working on its mission to reduce emissions, and this is the message we bring back to our communities, the 13 communities that are part of SVCE. Thank you. With that, let's move on to item number 3, which is to approve SVCE's participation in the California Public Utilities Commission hourly flex pricing pilots. This is an action item, and I know the executive committee heard about it. Very exciting, good conversation we had there. And we are going to have Sitlali Sandoval, the Senior Regulatory Advisor, presenting on this item. Oh, we have, okay, I'll let Sitlali make the introductions. Sitlali, while she's getting her microphone in, I see we have alternate director Abikoga joining us. There must have been some hiccup at Mountain View, so 7:15. Sitlali, go ahead. I was just filling time for you.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, directors. I'm Sitlali. I will be presenting, and I have here Beth Trenchard, who is the SME on the pilots, and we've been working together for over a year on this pilot. So I'm excited to speak to you all about it. So the purpose of the presentation is to ask that the board approve SVCE's participation in the upcoming hourly pricing pilot. And before I really get into any of the details, there's 4 things that I want to highlight for you all. The first is that the hourly flex pricing HFP pilots are California Public Utilities Commission designed, which means the CPUC designed them and they authorize them, and they will be administered by PG&E, not by SVCE, and they are 3-year pilots. And participation in this pilot really will benefit not only our customers, but it will also help SVCE and California's regulators learn more about hourly rate implementation. And the pilot will also support load management standards compliance, which I will get into in some upcoming slides. Your approval today would let us roll out the HFP pilot and take on any contracting or implementation actions that would be needed. And then the final point here that I want to make as early on in this deck, and I'll make it again, is that if we do not participate, then SVC customers, if they're interested in enrolling in the pilot, they would need to opt out of SVCE to participate. So now getting into the regulatory policy landscape here that kind of sets up why the CPUC authorized this pilot program and really why we want to participate in it. The SVCE and California's regulators, the CPUC and the California Energy Commission, the CEC, are increasingly focused on shifting usage out of the costly and dirty hours of the day. And the way they've begun to do this is that the CEC introduced regulations called the load management standards. And these standards push widespread demand flexibility because there's really an interest from both regulatory bodies in having stronger and more granular signals than the time of use rates that we currently have. And so you can see here on the graph on the right, this is the duck curve that I know we're all familiar with, and you can see in the evening hours, the red circle, that's when everyone is really using electricity. And so that peak there results in more likelihood of fossil plants having to be used to maintain grid reliability. And so what the state's trying to do is shift that usage to the middle of the day, the green circle, when we have an excess of solar on the grid, and if you shift the usage, then you can support SVC and our customers' interests in lowering costs and having a cleaner grid. So that's kind of the why in terms of this pilot. And now I will get into why these pilots are important to our compliance with the load management standards. So you might remember that last spring, the SVCE board adopted SVC's very first load management standards compliance plan. And this load management standards plan was required to be filed to the CEC by load serving entities and this requirement came out of the load management standards. And in that plan, SVCE explored not only rates but also programs to meet the LMS goals, and we described our intent to participate in the HFP pilot. So approval of our participation in the pilot really helps us execute on the content of that compliance plan and therefore meet our LMS obligations. So this is a key component, really underscoring the importance of our participation. Now let's get into the pilot details a little more. So the HFP pilots focus on shifting usage for certain customer segments. And I have them here in this table that's up on the screen. But the important thing is that regardless of the eligible rate or the applicable class, everyone enrolled in this pilot will be under the same CPUC-directed hourly pricing incentive structure. And so that's very important to call out. This is not a new rate, it's an incentive structure based on an hourly price. And so Moving on to the next slide, this pilot really adds to our growing portfolio of demand flexibility efforts. So SVCE acknowledges and sees potential in putting effort into demand flexibility because ultimately it just helps us better match our demand and our supply, and it's really potentially could be key to unlocking a cleaner and cheaper future grid. And so we have existing programs and rates. I won't get into all of them all here, but we have the SVC Lights on Silicon Valley program, our electric homes rate, the grid shift program, and most recently we have an RFO out for comprehensive demand flexibility proposals. And we started work on a lot of this stuff even before the CPUC was working to get approval for these pilots. So I think if you approve our participation, this pilot would just join our existing portfolio of demand flexibility efforts. And now getting into the actual pilot structure. The pilot, as I said in an earlier slide, is not a new rate that will be charged to customers. It's an hourly incentive mechanism that's separate from the regular bill that a customer pays. And so what happens is that this hourly price is going to be applied to the change in load from a customer's previous year baseline. And every month that the customer is enrolled in the pilot, they will receive an information-only performance report. And while on the pilot, the way that you can really save is by reducing your load from your baseline during high hourly priced hours, so the peak in the day, and then increasing your load from the baseline during the low hourly priced hours, so the off-peak. And at the end of 12 months, all of your performance reports would be trued up and your net savings would be calculated. And built into this pilot, there's customer bill protection. So the net total recorded charges and credits will never result in more than what you would pay on your regular bill. So that's the really cool thing here is that you will still get your normal monthly bill and your savings just get trued up on an annual basis. Getting into the potential fiscal impacts of our participation, all of this really depends on the scale of the uptake and how customers respond to the hourly price signals. And so we like to think about what the impacts could be from two perspectives: the impact to SVCE as an organization and our operations, and then the impact to our customers. So starting off with the impacts to SVCE, when the customer receives their annual true-up credit, SVCE covers the cost of those customer savings. But there's not expected to be a budget impact because the pilot is structured in a way so that it's cost neutral from a power supply perspective. So the customer savings are offset by our power supply savings. And we also are eligible to receive a CPUC funded incentive that's tied to how much SVCE customer load we enroll in the program. For our customers, this is a great opportunity for them to receive a performance incentive in the form of the annual credit if they are able to shift load. They also, so there's a range of the potential customer savings, and we did some analysis to get to these values, but it's expected to be $2 million. But depending on the scenario, we looked at low, medium, and high. It could range from 200,000 to 8 million. And this depends on how much customers opt into the pilots, market prices, of course, and the customer's ability to change their usage. The third impact to customers, which is really not an impact, but it's the fact that there's no risk here. So the customers have bill protection. And then the third thing is that customers would be able to access CPUC funded incentives, for example, for equipment costs. So the reason why we are coming to you today to recommend that you approve our participation is because we recognize potential in load modification to help us meet our targets, but we have no idea, and really California has no data today on how customers could respond to hourly price signals. And so we want to test the effectiveness of these price signals and understand how big is the impact. Does it even move the needle? We want to understand what the role, the need for automation service providers to help customers respond to the hourly price signals could be. And we want to test the effectiveness of this hourly incentive mechanism tied to the customer's baseline, because it's a unique way of structuring, really dipping your toe in the water into hourly pricing. So we want to see how that goes. And then we also want to, of course, ensure that our customers remain with SVCE. And if we do not choose to participate, then if a customer wants to enroll in the pilot, they would need to opt out, because PG&E will offer the pilot whether or not we choose to opt in. So in terms of actions needed to move forward, your approval would give us as staff the ability to take a couple of next steps. We'd continue to work with PG&E on the launch and the details of the annual performance reconciliation. And there's really two immediate next steps that need to happen. If you approve our participation, we would need to enter into an agreement with PG&E and submit an advice letter to the California Public Utilities Commission. And implementation details are still being finalized, but we may also need to adjust the method for the annual performance reconciliation, or potentially enter into implementation agreements with other vendors. And we also have the option to stop new customer enrollment at any time, and we can adjust if needed. So the pilot is currently in soft launch, but we don't expect the full outreach to begin until January of 2025, so the start of next year. And I'd like to just conclude by highlighting the fact that our participation in this pilot is key for LMS load management standards compliance and our exploration of real-time pricing. So we're requesting here that you approve our participation in the HFP pilot for the eligible agricultural, residential, and commercial customers, as aligned with PG&E's offers, since it is a PG&E administered pilot, and with delegation to staff to implement and roll out the pilot. And so I have a schedule here in terms of where we are. So today we're at November 13th, we're at the Board of Directors approval point. If we do get approval, then we'll submit that advice letter to the CPUC. And then in mid-2026, during the summer, the CPUC would conduct a midterm evaluation of the pilots and determine whether or not they would be modified or rolled into some other kind of program. And during this whole period, 2025 to 2027, we will closely monitor how our customers are doing if they choose to enroll in the pilots, and continue to assess the impacts and look at demand flexibility options even beyond the pilot. And I will take questions now.
Thank you so much, Sitlali, for the presentation. It's good to see yet another tool being added to the demand flexibility toolkit to change the behavior of people. Do we have any questions? Director Scazola, and then Director Martinez Beltran.
Hi, again, thank you for the presentation. I did have curiosity about the what motivates people to change their habits exactly. Like I've seen programs like this in the past, and you get your reports, and I noticed that there was a monthly report, but is there some more active thing, like such as text messages or regular emails, or like how are people going to know exactly when the peak hours are versus when they should be shutting off some of their electronics or whatever? I mean, oh, and by the way, shout out to Grid Shift rules. I wish everything could be automated like that, but knowing that, am I understanding this correctly, this is more based on like trying to train people to have better habits? Is that what we're doing here?
So there is a rule for automatic response through the automation service providers. But I think to answer the first part of your question, PG&E will post the hourly prices in advance. Yeah. So there will be a website, and then that PG&E will manage, and then we'll also have a web page up to help customers kind of understand what's going on, so they can monitor the use. But like you said, it's much easier if things are automated. So,
Right.
So I think the focus will be on understanding how we can leverage automation to really get the results that we're hoping for.
Yeah, I definitely see that as the path of the future for real success. And so that's why I'm wondering if we have any pull, or I know it's PG&E really that's taking this on, but I just know that human nature, most people, especially these days with people, 60% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck, they're running around, they don't have time, even though this would be so valuable for them to save money. So many people, most of the population doesn't have time for, oh, I'm going to do my research, let me go to that web page, let me figure out the best times of day, and then, make myself do the work. So that's why I felt like at least one, like a text reminder would be so key if it just was a mass to anyone in these programs. I know that we don't really have the ability, this is a PG&E program, but that would just be so helpful to, like, I know that would just take people out of their trance and be like, oh yeah, I do have too many lights on right now, or maybe I don't have to do the laundry right now, things of that nature. But so there's nothing like that at the moment in this, right? I'm still ultimately supportive of this, but nothing like that at this point.
Yeah, there's no plan for text messages, but that's because of the role of the automation service providers.
So I guess maybe that's what I'm not understanding is the automated aspect. What is?
Yeah, so Beth can speak to that a little
Okay,
more.
great.
So sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, thank you.
Part of the program with PG&E that will actually begin in January is PG&E will be incenting these, I'll call them solution providers, that will be able to, like Grid Shift, offer fabulous automated services to customers.
Okay.
And they'll be doing not only outreach, but offering these automated systems so that customers can work through those solution providers just like you would with Grid Shift. And then they'd get the weekly pings or the event announcements through those solution providers.
Okay. All right, great. Well, I'm very much looking forward to seeing the results.
Director Martinez Beltran.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, it looks like the pilot's ending in 2027 with the evaluation in 2026. Is there any talk about where they are hoping to go from here?
Not yet, because we haven't gotten to the evaluation point, but I think we've gotten some between the line signals from the California Public Utilities Commission as part of within one of their proceedings, that it's very likely that some of the components that are existing in this pilot would possibly want to be kept for future programs, so kind of like the bill protection aspects.
Mm-hmm.
But we really don't know yet.
Okay. Thank you.
Director Makachev.
Thank you. I'm really keen on this pilot. I think it's a really excellent way to go. And I think if we could take a look at the duck curve slide again, please. Essentially, while you're putting that up, moving anything that moves demand from the high carbon over at the right-hand side, the red circle, over to the green circle. I mean, that's all part of our mission, right? This is the decarbonization, moving that. So to me, this just has to happen. And could you also go to the tariff page, please?
The tariff page.
Whoop,
of
what was that?
The customer classes.
There we are.
Yeah.
I'm on the e-elect plan, but I've got solar, so I'm not quite on that yet. I'm very excited to be on that because I think financially it's a good thing for me. But I think as we think about this, this is where our customers are going to fall. I think that it's beneficial to all of our customers. And then my final, so it's kind of a comment, but I want to be part of this pilot. How do I get on it?
Well, Beth, do you want to take that? Sure. There's a website that we can direct you to.
Yeah, we'll have directions for how you would enroll on the Silicon Valley Clean Energy website. It should go live shortly after, if we receive board approval. PG&E is still pedaling quite fast to catch up with actually allowing customers to enroll. I believe they updated their enrollment forms for residents who want to enroll in the regular pilot, I think yesterday. So in effect, you could enroll online with PG&E today once Silicon Valley Clean Energy's board has approved our participation.
Excellent. Well, I'll be one of the first ones to sign up. And I think to get to Director Scazzola's point, depending on where you are with your electricity bill, there's a significant financial incentive here for shifting your load. And here's a question for you. If it's where you are against your baseline the prior year, is that correct? So, and it's a 2-year pilot?
3-year.
3-year pilot. So if you shift your load between year 0 and year 1, and then you maintain it in year 2 and year 3, you don't get the benefits in year 2 and year 3, the incremental ones, but you've still shifted your load. Did I summarize that correctly?
It'll be interesting to see if they adjust that, but as of now, you'll actually look at your current month of this year compared to your current month of your prior year. And as long as that delta of the shift between those two periods, then you'll get benefit.
Well, what about the second year of the pilot and the third year of the pilot?
Yeah, I don't know if there's going to be an ongoing expectation that you'll continue to reduce it, or if they'll evaluate the pilot and actually adjust how the change is calculated.
Okay, well, I'm excited and I'm going to be supporting this.
Thank you. Other questions? Director Rennie.
Maybe the question. Well, so maybe the question is whether how much automation they're planning to control. So my house is all electric at this point, and what I observe in the summertime, I open the windows, the house cools off, and close them in the morning. And about 4 o'clock, when the rates are the maximum rate, the house has now gotten to the point that we need to turn the air conditioner on. So it's rough to not use the air conditioner. And the same thing's probably true for heat too. During the day, it's a little bit warmer, but by the time the evening comes, you got to have a little heat. So not using 2 of the big electricity producers in my house during those hours is really tough. If there was some way for them to coordinate across it and control the HVAC systems, let's say a group of houses get 10 minutes on and then 10 minutes off, and another group gets 10 minutes on while those are off, the total usage in that period can be brought down at any given time, for example. And that would allow the house to still stay cool, but to adjust when each house is using it so they don't all accidentally use it at the same time and add up to a bigger number that's needed at any given time. That seems like a more possible way to make some headway. And then the other one is with the electric vehicle charging. I've set mine so that it is ready to charge at 7 in the morning, but then sometimes I come home during the day and I'm like, well, I need some, and I forget that I've set it on that and didn't do any charging even when it was cheap during the day. So a little more help on the electrical vehicle charging side might help also. But I don't know if it's a question as much as something to think about, offsetting loads by people so they can still, if you just send them, the brute force text message, hey, turn off your air conditioning, people aren't going to do that because now it's getting to be 78, 80 degrees and they want the air conditioning on at the wrong time of the day.
Thank you. Yes, that's a great comment. I've made a note of it, and we'll keep it in mind. We'll see if what you're thinking might happen is what ends up happening when we go through the midterm evaluation.
Other questions? Director Lee?
Actually, I just want to say great report, and I'm ready to approve the SVCEA participation in pilot solution.
We haven't yet. We're still in questions. So, thank you. Do we have any questions online? None? Okay. I have one question, very simple, bringing it down to the public. How do we inform SVCE customers about this pilot, and how do we maximize the number who participate in it? Because I noticed in your report as well as the presentation, you're saying we don't know how many would like to adopt. Low numbers, medium range, or high. So what's the simplest way for us to get the message out?
Yeah, so PG&E is leading with their MEO strategy, but we plan to support. And so we'll use some of the marketing tools that we use for all of our other programs. So for this specific one, we're planning for direct outreach to specific customers that we think would benefit. Emails. We'll have a website as well. So it'll be a lot of the same strategies that we use, but really PG&E as the administrator is leading with the outreach and enrollment, and we're really more in a supporting role.
So when you said the customers who we think would benefit the most, are we analyzing that data or plan to? My point is not right now. Who are using heavier use that we can shift their demand?
Yeah, so we did look at, for example, the commercial and industrial customer base because we think there's a lot of potential there, and at electrical vehicle users. And we did conduct an analysis. Could you put the deck up, thanks? To get to the scenarios, I think you heard me speak about the range 200,000 to 8 million. We based that off of scenarios based on some usage, which I will get to here. But we looked at two rate classes, the electrical vehicle homes charging rate and the commercial and industrial customer rate, and made some assumptions based on an Oak Ridge National Labs study, as well as our understanding of behavior for these classes, and built out some low, medium, and high scenarios. So there has already been some analysis done, but I'd imagine we could revisit it as we get actual data from participation.
Oh, wonderful. Just another thought, sometimes we can get a lot more bang for the buck by going with volume. Maybe not such high load usage, but there would be a lot of customers. I think of Saratoga, we are 1/3 seniors, and seniors can be with the mostly single family homes in Saratoga. There would be higher usage and they can manage it even without automation. Just thinking down the road that if you get more numbers out there and encouraging and letting them know what's a better way. You may even get higher participation there because those people can be more responsive towards, especially when you give the incentive of reducing the price point for them. Just some thoughts
Yeah,
to
thank
keep in
you.
mind. Thanks. Okay, public comment? None? Okay, bring it back to the board. And now I'm ready for a motion.
Good, thank you. I'll make a motion to approve SVC's participation in the CPUC hourly flex pricing pilots.
I'll
Okay.
second that motion.
Okay. Any other comments? None? Let's have the vote, please, Andrea.
Thank you. Chair Walia?
Aye.
Vice Chair Tyson?
Yes.
Dr. Scozola?
Aye.
Rennie?
Aye.
Mekachek?
Aye.
Martinez Beltran?
Aye.
Abekoga? Aye. Lee?
Aye.
Hilton?
Aye.
Meadows?
Aye.
Chua?
Aye.
Thank you. That motion carries.
Wonderful. Let's move on to item number 4, which is to adopt SVCE's long-term clean targets. And the staff person presenting is Director of Regulatory Policy and Planning. That is Maren Wenzel.
All right, good evening, everyone. I'll let Andrea cue up the deck here. So we're here to talk tonight about SVC's long-term clean targets. And this is really a continuation of a discussion we had back in September where we talked about various clean pathways. So we're coming to you tonight with recommendations to really set standards for SVC going forward and clean targets going forward. So what we're going to talk about today first is just give a quick overview of the recommendation that we'll come back to at the end, as well as a summary of our current targets. Then I want to give a little bit of a recap of what we talked about in September. We'll talk through a number of potential targets, including 2 new targets that we didn't discuss in September, but we've been thinking about since. We want to talk about a few other considerations as we set up these targets, and then finally we'll come back with the recommendation. So there's a lot on this slide, but let me just summarize at a high level what we're planning to recommend this evening. So first of all, we're hoping that SVC will set a target for the 2030 to 2034 time horizon of a 75% RPS target on a retail sales basis and 100% clean measured annually. Then from 2035 to 2045, move to 100% RPS on a retail sales basis and 100% clean measured annually. Part of our ask this evening is to allow for a up to 10% margin of error on these targets to help us manage our risk and the procurement process. We'll talk more about this later, so I think I'll pause on that for the time being. We are also looking for the board to approve us defining clean energy resources to include RPS eligible resources, as well as carbon-free large hydroelectricity and nuclear energy. And then we'll talk about including line losses as applicable this evening as well. And then there's a couple of additional sort of reporting requirements that we think it makes sense for the board to direct staff to do as well, but maybe I'll come back to that at the end for the time being. So just as a reminder, our current clean targets are only set through 2030. And those clean targets are that for the midterm period, 2025 through 2029, will remain at 100% clean on an annual basis, and our RPS target will exceed the state minimum by at least 5% of the California RPS program. And so we're not recommending any changes this evening to those sort of short to midterm targets. Now, to sort of go back to what we talked about in September as a reminder, so we came to the board and we talked about a lot of key planning and policy questions, but the 2 sort of big questions were, how should we define clean? Do we want to think about it on an annual, hourly basis, or using some other target? And over what time horizon do we want to hit those targets? And so at that meeting, we presented findings that E3, the consulting group, did for us on a number of different pathways, including 24/7 carbon-free portfolios. And we looked at the required build, the rate impact, the cost of achieving those portfolios. And we also discussed a number of risks, especially due to market conditions, risk around our load, and regulatory risk. And a lot of that regulatory risk comes from allocations that we currently get from PG&E but may not in the future, as well as potential central procurement entities pushing projects into our portfolio. Our staff's takeaway was that overall there was support for not adopting 24/7 given all of the risk associated with it, but there was some desire to figure out a way to go beyond just being 100% clean on an annual basis. And so since the September meeting, staff has been thinking through everything we discussed. We've assessed a couple of different clean targets that we'll talk about in a moment. And we also spent some time thinking about, what we really want to count as clean and, whether or not we want to count clean on a retail sales basis or really on our total load. And we'll talk more about that later. And then, as I hinted at the beginning, we also thought through whether or not it would be beneficial for us to have a little bit of flexibility in meeting our clean targets through use of some uncertainty bands. So just a quick reminder on what we talked about in September, some of the results. So this graphic was showing how much new capacity we would have to add under various clean scenarios. And as you may recall, the 100% hourly matching case would require as much as 2,300 megawatts of new capacity, which might be very difficult for us to procure. We also noted that there's a lot of volatility just in the output of resources. And so if you want to achieve something with a high degree of probability of achieving it, you might need to procure an additional 15 to 20% versus if you just wanted sort of to procure it at an expected value. And then the final thing that we noted from this slide was really that you can see a pretty clear trend that as you move from annual matching scenarios to hourly matching scenarios, there's a very clear preference of the model to start picking up more wind resources, which are really delivering in those dirtiest hours. Another thing we talked about was really just the cost associated with all of these portfolios. And so we noted that relative to the minimum compliance scenario of 90% annually clean, an hourly scenario could cost up to $300 million more per year. One of the things we also discussed at some length was that theoretically, at least as the model thinks about it, there is a chance that a lot of that $300 million could be recouped through the sale of the attributes from the resources you would have to procure. So theoretically, the net cost could be as low as $7 per megawatt hour if you're able to sell the energy attributes, the RECs, and the RA associated with these projects. But one of the things we talked about is that those market conditions are incredibly uncertain, and so we really can't guarantee that these revenues would come to fruition, and so the more over procurement you do, the greater the risk you have in your portfolio. So where we landed at the end of the meeting in September was essentially minimum compliance didn't feel like something SVC wanted to pursue. We've always gone above and beyond minimum compliance, but perhaps hourly was a little bit too much. And so we were trying to figure out, okay, what's the sort of right metric to get us somewhere between annual and hourly that felt like a good fit for the organization. So as I said, after the meeting, we went back and had some more internal discussions, and we talked about two other new metrics that we might want to consider. One, I think, was actually brought about by the board or mentioned by the board, so we talked through it, and that was maybe we should work to achieve clean on a monthly basis as opposed to an annual basis. Essentially how we would do this is we'd build up our long-term portfolio as we already need to do for compliance reasons. And then if you had any gaps in a particular month, you would purchase monthly short-term renewable energy credits and or carbon-free to fill the gaps in the portfolio. So this does get you a little bit closer to 24/7 than an annual an annual requirement, right? You would no longer be able to lean on the clean months to help cover your dirty months. But fundamentally, as Silali showed earlier in the duck curve, emissions follow a daily pattern. And so while there is some seasonal benefits, it's relatively limited. But moreover, we're not sure that these products really exist on the market that would allow the procurement team to go out and buy these monthly products and fill these gaps. So for that reason, we're not necessarily recommending that as a target this evening. The other concept that we discussed internally after the meeting was a PPA GHG metric. And so essentially what we would do here is every time we're evaluating a long-term PPA, part of our evaluation criteria would include looking at the emissions impact on SVC's portfolio. So essentially, details are still being worked out, which we'll talk a little bit more about later, but we would, in our evaluation process, try to estimate how these emissions impact the portfolio and potentially also system-wide gas dispatch. And that would be sort of used to, a higher impact or higher reduction on emissions would give the product more points and therefore make it more likely to be selected. So we think one of the nice things about this is that it ensures that our long-term portfolio is moving in the right direction of getting cleaner on an hourly basis, but it doesn't island SVC and it doesn't put us into a position of over-procuring like 24/7 procurement would. I will note that there's a couple of negatives associated with this as well, potentially. One is that the way we do PPA evaluation now is you essentially assign points to different types of metrics. So there's economic metrics, there are risk metrics, and so necessarily if you introduce a new metric, you're going to focus a little bit less on those other metrics. The other potential challenge with this metric is that it's going to rely on forecast emissions, which may or may not be accurate, and so we can't guarantee that what we are estimating the emissions impact will be will actually come to fruition. One thing I want to note about this evaluation metric is that the CEO already has authority to establish the evaluation metrics that we use when determining long-term PPAs. So our recommendation here is less that the board direct us to do this and more that the board asks that we monitor and report out how these PPAs impact our clean targets going forward. And so to that end, this is another sort of category of directions that I think we're going to come back to the board in March to discuss in further detail. But what we're imagining here is that we would start reporting out to the board on how PPAs impact, how individual PPAs impact our portfolio as part of the PPA approval process, but also that SVC staff on a at least annual basis would report out what our clean position looks like. And so this would be a backwards look at what our actual clean position was. There's a number of different ways we could do that. We could use something like the carbon-free energy score that Google uses. We could just report out how many clean hours we achieved in a given year, so sort of a binary yes or no. Or we could do something like this illustrative example at the bottom, where we would show how clean we were in a given hour over the course of the year. So a couple other, I guess, sort of odds and ends of things that we were considering as we were going through this process. One was, what types of resources do we want to consider eligible for procurement? And we think it's important that we consider both new and existing resources. We also think that it's important to align our procurement with, or what we're willing to procure with the state's definition for SB 100 compliance. And so to that end, we would be able to procure all RPS eligible resources, carbon-free large hydro, as well as carbon-free nuclear. The one thing I want to note is that as we move beyond 2030 and move towards SB 100 compliance, there is a chance that the power content categories are going to be looked at again. And I know that SVC has historically had a preference for procuring PCC1s, so we will continue to do that for the time being, but just to note, we may come back to the board and discuss these power content categories if there's any changes to them in the future. One of the other sort of key topics that we talked about as we were trying to think through how to set our clean targets was whether or not to include line losses. So line losses are essentially the energy that gets lost over the transmission and distribution system as it's transmitted from the generation facility to the customer. And historically, SVC has covered line losses in trying to meet its 100% clean goals, but not all of the regulatory requirements are based on the sort of gross or total load, including line losses. Many of them are based on retail sales, which is really just the customer demand. We are seeing this change a little bit, so going forward, the power content label will be based on sort of gross demand, including line losses. And so for that reason, we think it's important that we do continue to cover those line losses. But as you'll notice in the recommendation, we talk about retail sales for the RPS target and 100% clean annually for the clean target. And so the thinking there is that we would always be allowed to cover our line losses using carbon-free and large hydro and nuclear. So one of the sort of final big sort of other categories that, and I think we talked about this at the September board meeting, is just a reminder that we have a huge amount of uncertainty in our planning processes. So what this graphic is showing is the black line is our expected load, and the red line is sort of the band of uncertainty around what we think our load might be going into the future. And then the stacked graphic beneath it shows our long-term clean position. So that's all of the resources we expect to have in our portfolio going forward. The top three colors in that stack graphic, you'll notice, are sort of hash marked. And those are allocations that we may or may not receive in the future. So that's the Diablo Canyon nuclear plant, PG&E hydro allocations, and potential central procurement entity allocations. I'll note this does not include any future procurement orders that we might receive as well, which could bump this whole stack even higher. But the point here is that you can see that in a low load scenario, we're already actually potentially long if all of these allocations come through. And I think one of the things we talked about back in September is that generally we like to have laddering in our portfolio where we have room to do some short-term contracting. And so you can see that we might already be, in a long position, but I think the broader story here is that there's so much going on both the supply and demand side that it can be very challenging to hit any specific target. And so for that reason, one of the things that we're asking the board to approve this evening is a little bit of flexibility in hitting our exact specific targets. And I want to be very clear that the intent here is that the procurement team and staff will do everything they can to hit these targets, but recognizing that there's a huge amount of uncertainty, that these allocations can come and go sort of very quickly, depending upon decisions that come out of the CPUC. It can at times be very challenging for us to meet these targets. And so when we're in a situation like we were last year, where we sort of realized that the market wasn't going to allow us to hit our targets, it created challenges for staff, sort of a rush to come back to the board and figure out what to do. So the intent here is that we would have a little bit of flexibility and not need to necessarily come to the board and explain the situation in a rushed manner. But essentially what this is showing, this graphic, is what our compliance obligation would be, what our target is, and you could see across all these scenarios we stay above the minimum compliance, and then a request for a 10% uncertainty band. So if in 2030 we were only able to achieve 65% RPS for whatever reason, we would not necessarily need to come back to the board and have that discussion unless we fell below the 65% threshold. And once again, all of our proposed targets, RPS is measured on a retail sales basis, and clean would be measured on a gross loss adjusted load. We met with the executive committee in October and received unanimous support for the staff recommendation. There was a request for more information and details around the 10% margin and how it would be applied and how we would report on these things. There was also a request for more definition and details around the assessment of the GHG metrics, including when we would show these evaluations to the board. And I think at this point we're still working through some of this, so part of our request for this evening is that we'll come back to the board in March on some of those reporting requirements. So with that, I'll summarize the request one more time. So we are hoping that you all approve our recommendation, as well as the Executive Committee's recommendation to establish the following clean energy targets and minimum RPS standards for SVCE. For 2030 to 2034, 75% RPS on a retail sales basis and 100% clean measured annually. 2035 to 2045, 100% RPS retail sales and 100% clean measured annually. Allowance for a 10% margin of error on the targets to help us manage risk. That we would define clean energy resources to include RPS eligible resources as well as carbon-free large hydro and nuclear energy, and include line losses as applicable, which would mean those 100% clean annual targets. And then additionally direct staff to return to the board by March of 2025 with recommendations for how to incorporate and inform the board of the expected clean position and any expected shortfall, how to incorporate the hourly GHG reductions in assessments and approvals for our PPAs, and then finally to report out on our clean hourly progress. And with that, I will pause and return it to the chair.
Wow. Maren, that's a lot to present, and to be able to convey it in segments, in chunks that we can follow. I applaud you for that. Thank you so much. It's very complicated, a lot of nuances. Again, reminding us once again, we are looking at clean, affordable, and reliable, all those together, and looking long-term in a complex, ever-changing market from all angles. Great. Questions? Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. Maren, may I go back to slide number 15 where you have the chart of the various sources, right? Correct, thank you. So looking at this right now I think we're looking okay in the next few years. The problem, of course, is when you continue looking outwards. One area I was very surprised to see that has dropped significantly here is the solar. How that amount, as you could see, has really trended down fairly quickly after 2038, 39. Is it because we don't have contract that extends that long? Is that what's going on, and that we need longer term contracts just need to be signed?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So a lot of these are, what you're seeing there is a lot of the contracts just starting to roll off because a lot of our PPAs are 10, 15, 20-year PPAs. So, yeah.
And is it possible for us to, it's pretty far out, but the thing is, given the fact that we look so far out, is it possible for us to extend these periods a bit longer to give us more stability in the long run? I see Monica was reaching on the mic.
Yeah, most of our contracts don't have any rights for us to extend them. We would have to renegotiate them. It would likely be part of either a solicitation process when we're out procuring that the developers or the owners of these projects could offer in their projects to us beyond the current term. We are starting to include, when we negotiate new contracts, terms in the contracts that would allow for an automatic renewal beyond the existing term. But the set of contracts that we signed, starting in 2018 all the way through 2022, 2023, do not have those automatic renewals in them. It just wasn't standard at the time to think about that. But yes, you are completely right in your observation in that there is a big cliff out there, and we're doing everything we can to fill that cliff right now as much as possible.
Right, and I think that applies to even geothermal as well, right? The green just kind of disappeared. So if there's any way we could start looking earlier than waiting till last minute, certainly, I guess they could get extended, but I don't know if it's better to negotiate earlier versus later. I don't know.
It's all a question of market timing as well, right? And that's part of our strategy has always been to ladder, because we don't want to lock everything in particularly high market if we're in a high market environment.
Right.
So I don't think we have a lot of urgency right now, and a lot of our procurement the last couple of years has really been focused on new capacity because we had these very large procurement orders that the CPUC gave us that had to be incremental new capacity. So that's been our focus.
Right. Great. Thank you so much.
That's why SVCE is SVCE 2.0 right now, the evolution from the infancy to where we are headed next. Okay, Director Rennie, but I think you raised your hand earlier, Vice Chair Tyson, then after that.
Okay. Well, thank you for the presentation. I think you showed a lot of long-term thinking and build some flexibility into it. And just a clarification, I think I know the answer. When you talk about a 10% wiggle room, that's 10 percentage points, not 10%, right? So if it's 50% is the target, you're saying 40%, not 45.
Yeah, that's a good clarification. And actually, the way that graphic is shown, I believe it's 10%. It's 10% total. So here, the way we've shown it is, if you look at 2030 again, our target would be 75%, but our minimum before we hit the threshold where we'd come back to the board would be 65%.
Yes.
Once you get to 2045, it's obviously the same.
Does, yes, it does. Thank you.
Director Rennie?
On the page 15 graph, what the first thing that looked to me missing was the offshore wind. So I'm assuming it's included in the CPE unknown allocation. That's still, we're likely to get an offshore wind allocation at some point?
That's correct. A significant portion of that first order, which didn't require but authorized DWR, the Department of Water Resources, to go out and look for resources, included a significant portion of offshore wind.
Okay, that's all questions.
Director Makachuk?
Could you go to the heat map slide, please? There we go, 13, yeah. That would be really good to see that visually. That's really good, I like that. And speaking in terms of the variability, as I, having watched this market for a while, stare into the future, I think that the regionalization in the western U.S. could really affect the supply. So I advocate the 10%. And then also on the demand side, as we move to real-time pricing at some point in the future, that could have a major impact as well. So I'm thoroughly support the recommendation as put forth.
Thank you. Other questions? Any questions online, Andrea? Okay. Open public comment. Anyone?
No hands raised online.
Okay, and there's no one online public. Okay. Close public comment and bring it back to the board. Again, Martin, I'm very impressed with how you have presented this and how, Monica, thank you to SVCE team, SVCE, to think that far. I think somebody's ready to make a motion. Director Makachuk is more than ready.
I'll make a motion to adopt SVCE's long-term clean targets.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Let's have the vote.
Chair Walia?
Aye.
Vice Chair Tyson?
Yes.
Director Scozola?
Aye.
Rennie?
Aye.
Makachuk?
Aye.
Martinez Beltran?
Aye.
Abe Koga?
Aye.
Lee?
Aye.
Hilton?
Aye.
Meadows?
Aye.
Chua?
Aye.
Thank you. That motion carries.
I have a comment here. Director Rennie.
It might be a question. So we just approved what he said, long-term targets. Does that, I'm assuming that doesn't include the additional direct staff to return to the board by March 25th, because I don't define those as long-term targets.
Just to clarify my motion, it was everything that was on the slide that staff presented.
That's slide number 18.
Okay, because that's
No,
not what I heard.
My apologies for that.
Okay, well then, I just want to make sure those were included, because I wanted
it's
to make
everything
sure.
on that slide.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And the seconder of the motion, Vice Chair Tyson?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. I think we are all clear. No confusion? Okay, good. Wonderful. With that, we will move on to item number 5, the last item on tonight's agenda. Yay, we are doing well with time. Local agency action planning. This is an informational item, and the presenter is Zoe Elizabeth, Deputy Director of Decarbonization Programs and Policy.
Good evening, Chair and board members. I'm here with the bi-monthly, feels like it's been a year the last couple months, update on local agency action planning. I believe my colleague Tony Yulo is also on the line in case there's any detailed questions. So we'll go to the next slide. Yep, so I'm here to provide an update. I also realized as I was sitting in the audience, we are about to embark on next year is when the statewide code, the triennial code is updated, which will mark the third time that SVCE has been working with our member agencies on these code updates. We've been through a lot of changes over those years, lots of twists and turns in the Berkeley lawsuit and changing administrations. But also just marking there's been this steady drumbeat of progress and momentum that's been built. When we started this work, the state code, gas was the baseline. And it was really hard to build electric because all of the methodologies that was used by the state code used gas as the baseline. That has changed completely. And this year, the 2025, the baseline calculations are done using heat pumps. We actually met with CEC staff today to talk about their goals, and they specifically said that these changes are due to local action, that the state code only moves when local agencies take action and then prove that, and it can move up to the state code. We've all known that, and we've been saying it to you all, but I wanted to share those words from the CEC themselves. So just remembering that this momentum continues to build. So this initiative is formally our policy and permit modernization work. We've got the technical resources. We've already been working for the last year, and I'll go through the action, kind of some high-level summaries of the action plans with staff from each of your agencies. This work will be kicking into the next gear over the next 12 months as we move into state code adoption, and many of the actual ordinances that your city staff are interested in passing will start to come into your city council meetings. Slide. Okay, so we tried to set out a simple menu of kind of 3 tiers of action. Your city staff also provided us with additional ideas and insights, so these sort of changed, but the whole goal is basically to help prepare our region for upcoming BACMed regulations and other state regulations, and to kind of, in a really economic and sensible way, reduce the pollution from existing and new buildings in our service territory. Okay, so the exciting part here is that we have met multiple times with all of your city staff, and when I say we, I mostly mean Tony Yulo and Napur Higher Math, who each are working with individually with your staff. Some of these, many of these plans are now finalized, and we just kind of giving a high-level example. You can see cities are piecing together tailored action plans that make sense for each of your communities. I will also say we've got 4 agencies that are reviewing or finalizing. That's really just because we're kind of taking additional time to meet with them. Everybody's been really active and very responsive, so I want to kind of put those pieces up front, but we never want to put anything on this slide until the staff has fully signed off on it. So some of these things are just kind of noted as TBD. You will each be receiving an email from us in the next couple of weeks, and when those plans are finalized, with the draft plan so you can review it. And then we are happy to answer any questions you have, any resources that you need, whether by email or to meet with you one-on-one to kind of go over the steps for what will happen next. Okay. And finally, we've started this tradition of trying to have celebrations at the end of this. So we've got 2 here. So Campbell released an Electrify Your Home webpage. It's a really great resource, as Tony says, that simply rocks, high praises. And great, I know lots of folks are interested in how you can get the word out there beyond just SVCE's website, so it's a great opportunity. And Los Altos joins the ranks of Monte Sereno to offer real-time heat pump water heater permitting. So congratulations, and really leading the way. This is an effort that the state is trying to figure out across the state, so really showing kind of the nimbleness of small jurisdictions here. And that's everything.
Wonderful. Thank you, Zoe, and congratulations, Campbell, Los Altos. I see Director Meadows is there online, and of course Montessorino, and some others who have led the charge in so many ways. Director Rennie has a question.
I do have a question. On the leading practices, you have one called require disclosures about gas appliances at time of sale, which is, we're trying to figure out what we're going to do in Los Gatos on maybe a new ordinance or something to replace what's being forced to be removed. And I'm particularly interested about stoves that generate indoor air pollution. And what I'm knowing the people of Los Gatos are not going to like really us preventing them from having gas stoves, but I'd like them to be much better educated in what they're buying into if they do get them. But I'm having trouble figuring out how we as a small city can require a disclosure. Like, is it, we can't require something that's placed on it. It's too small a jurisdiction. I mean, how is a disclosure going to work? Are we going to make the contractor get a signature from the homeowner that they've read a piece of paper? What does this mean?
Yeah, great question. So this would be the time of sale of the property. So when the homes are sold, jurisdictions have the ability to add disclosures. Actually, the city of Berkeley has one, and then statewide a rule was passed to around other appliances, but just as you mentioned, it does not include cooking or other indoor cooking appliances, basically. And so the jurisdiction but it would be for the time of sale of the home, not of appliances.
So that doesn't seem like it's going to have much effect, because you're not disclosing at really the decision point. I'm not going to decide not to buy my home because it had a gas stove in it that you told me might be dangerous.
I think you're probably right that it won't add to this is the kind of action that's not going to have thousands of new appliances installed, but what it does is it gives folks the information, and they may then choose when they replace that kitchen, if they're doing a remodel, people often do after they buy a home, to then go induction, because they probably maybe didn't know about the health impacts.
I agree, it maybe has some effect, but people will forget, and by the time it comes around. So I could see it being useful, but not sure how effective. Thank you.
Yep.
Other questions? None? This is a good informational item. Anyone online? None? Public comment? None? Close public comment. Bring it back to the board. And Zoe, thank you so much.
Thank you.
This is what makes the change happen. So wonderful, great job. Thanks. With that, we will move to board member announcements and direction on future agenda items. Any thoughts? Director Mekachuk.
I don't have an announcement. I just want to make a couple of comments. First of all, I attended the Verge conference, and thank you very much, SVCE, for allowing me to attend. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and the SVCE, I think it's the mobile demonstration trailer?
Dream Home.
Dream Home. That was pretty amazing. I went through it, and for the board members that haven't seen it, I recommend that you take a look at it. 'Cause I think it got a lot of attention. It was very positive there. Anyways, that's those are my comments. Thank you.
It will be here. We will all get to see it before the next board meeting that day. Other comments? None?
Yep.
Oh, you do. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I
Dr.
just
Lee.
want to echo the same comment. Thank you for SVC for sponsoring. I wasn't able to go. One of my staff, Emily, was able to attend, and certainly have many good learning experience bringing back. So first, thanks for that. Second is I am going to attend the COP this year, a little bit far, a place called Azerbaijan. And I look at the map, the next closest border to the north is Russia, and the closest border south is Iran. So it'll be a very exciting place. I'll behave, my best behavior, but certainly given the recent election results and whatnot, I think this will be a very important conference to see what measures being adopted and how that that change might affect future direction of this as well, because so many all countries in the world really need the financing to help push forward these important measures and how that will be affected. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you once again, everyone, for a good meeting. CEO Monica Padilla has some comments.
Yeah, I should have mentioned this during the earlier CEO report, but just a reminder that next month we will be hosting a holiday mixer, here at the same location before we meet. I believe it starts at 4:30 and will end right before the board meeting. We sent you all an invitation. We hope you can join. Chair Walea will be our keynote speaker, or one of our speakers, and so we've invited several members from the community who have participated in some of our programs to talk about the impacts our programs have had on their homes or businesses. So it'll be a fun event. Hopefully you can all make it as well.
Thank you, Monica. And that's the time we get to see the exciting Dream Home, right?
Yes, and the Dream Home will be in the parking lot, and hopefully it won't rain. So.
That's true. Okay. Wonderful. With that, the meeting is adjourned at 8:26 p.m.